Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm an amateur model builder. I'm building a layout in my basement called the White River Line, inspired by the Frisco Railroad in the Ozarks. In this episode, I'm going to be building a three-way switch from a paper template. This switch is going to go at the bottom of my rail yard and will lead into an engine service area. It's going to replace a couple of standard switches that I'd planned on putting there originally, and it ought to save me a little bit of space. So it's a little more complicated than your standard switch, so I'll learn a few things along the way. Now, I do have some winners to announce for my 2K giveaway. I reached 2,000 subscribers, so I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm just so grateful to all of you guys out there who've been enjoying my videos. So stick around to the end of the video where I'll announce those winners. But in the meantime, let's jump into it. I started out by printing out a copy of the Fast Track's three-way switch template. I trimmed and joined the two sheets into one. Using some spray adhesive, I glued it down to a piece of Homocell. Next, I grabbed some PC board ties and cut them free from the frets. I marked and cut them to the proper length. Then I marked and filed some gaps so that the rails will be electrically isolated. Using micro-engineering medium spikes, I spiked down the ties to the template. I quickly made 4 of the guardrails on the I filed a compound angle on the head of the rails to ease the wheel's transition into the guardrails. And then I set those aside. Next, I started building the 3 frog points for the switch by cutting bits of rail to the approximate length. Then I used the Fast Track point forming tool and filed the rails for 2 of these 3 frog points. For this frog point in the middle, it is a slightly wider angle than the other two. So I used the slots for the crossings on my number 6 crossover point forming tool. Using a Fast Track's frog helper tool, I soldered the first 2 frog points. Then I soldered them to the PCB ties. I used my 3-point track gauge to make sure the second frog was in the correct place. Getting the right angle on the third frog point wasn't quite as easy. I don't have the correct angle on my frog helper tool. So I pinned down another copy of the switch template to a piece of Homosote, and I did my best with some T-pins to keep these pieces in the right place. And then I soldered the point together. A little more shaping is needed for this frog point. I filed some notches to create the wings. And then I clipped the ends to the length and added a profile to the rail like I did with the guardrails. Finally, I soldered it in place. Now I'm ready to add the stock rails. After clipping them to the correct length, I shaped them to approximately the right curve. I need to file some notches in the base of the rail so that these stock rails will accept the points on the closure rails. The first stock rail actually needs 2 notches, one for the point that will lead to the straight and left-hand route, and one for the right-hand route. I marked and filed these notches. These rails always need a little bit more shaping after filing away the base. The other stock rail only needs 1 notch filed. I soldered the stock rails at the ends, leaving the middle section loose for now. I'll solder this section as I install the closure rails to ensure that the gauge is correct. Which is my next step, to add the closure rails. Again, I clipped the pieces of rail to the approximate length I needed. I started with the closure rail at the throat of the switch that leads to the straight route and the right-hand route. In addition to filing the angle for the switch point, I'll need to make a notch in the base of this rail to accept the switch point that leads to the right-hand route. After adding the wing and cutting this rail to the correct length, I soldered it in place. Next, I built the closure rail that engages with this one that I just installed. When closed, this point leads to the right-hand route. I removed a little bit of the base of the rail on the end of the wing, just to make sure I could get it into the correct spot without bumping into the base of the rails on either side of it. With this closure rail installed, I soldered the stock rail for the right-hand route. The next closure rail was the one that leads from the throat of the switch to the left-hand route. With this one installed, I was able to do a bit more soldering on the stock rail for that left-hand route. Finally, I built the last closure rail. When closed, this one leads to the straight route. Next, I installed the guardrails I had set aside earlier. One more guardrail is needed, and it has to fit here between two rails. I need to file this end at an angle so it'll fit in between those rails. This rail has to be soldered to the closure rail for the straight route. The wheels don't pass through this gap, so it isn't a problem for the solder to go in between them. Well, except that I got a little bit of solder on top of the rail, so I had to sand that off. The switch points will need to be hinged. They're too short to flex open and closed. This process starts by sawing the points off the closure rails, so I need to remove the switch from the template. I picked up a new little bench vise to do this work. I marked the rails 3/16 of an inch from the last PC board ties that they are soldered to. I placed them on the template to keep track of which rails they came from. As I was sawing the third point, I realized that I marked it in the wrong spot. I guess I'll just have to make a new point for this one. I removed these last 2 points, now at the correct spot. Then I filed a new switch point to replace the one I'd screwed up. To make the hinges, I start by filing triangular notches in the base of the rail about 1/16 of an inch from the edge on both sides. The hinges will be made from rail joiners. I slipped one on the end of the point and crimped it at the notches. Then I clipped off the little tab and cleaned it up with a file. I slipped the points back onto the closure rails. Then I soldered the joiners to the closure rail very carefully, making sure not to get solder in the joint itself. That way it'll continue to move freely. Next, I soldered the switch points to the throw bars. Well, other than gapping the frogs to isolate them and cleaning up the solder and flux, the switch is all done. I'll be using it at the bottom of the yard, and it will lead to an engine service area. Well, I got to 2,000 subscribers, so we've got a couple of winners of the 2K giveaway. In first place is Bessemer and Lake Erie in HO scale. They will receive this Bowser covered hopper, which I will paint, decorate, and weather for them. In second place is Rail Artist. They will receive a Bowser covered hopper too, but they'll have to do the finishing themselves. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and those links are below in the description, along with a list of tools, supplies, and resources I use. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave me a like. It is the easiest way to support my channel. Of course, subscribing is pretty good too. Next time I'll get back to some more work on the Lumberyard Kit Bash project. Probably mostly painting and a little bit of assembling. Thanks for watching, and please join me again next time as I continue modeling the White River Line.